Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, or whenever you happen to be listening to this. All right, that's enough of that. Welcome to the Film Realist Podcast, the film and TV podcast from a complete nobody that is hopefully for somebody. Episode 127 is going to be a review of Castlevania Nocturne Season 2. And just like Alucard Tempest, Rain Naylor is back on the podcast to review the second season. Welcome back, Rain.
Hi, good to be back.
You have just finished season 2, so it is as fresh as possible.
Mhm.
As this is a TV season review, we are going to give full spoilers. There's going to be no non spoilers because by the time you're listening to this, you've had 2 full weekends to watch the show. So if you haven't watched it at this point, were you gonna? I'm just asking but if you plan on listening to this anyways, I'm not gonna lie, I appreciate you even more. So we're gonna jump into full spoilers, and then as we've ended every episode since I believe like episode 10, we will respond to question of the week responses and any of your listener mail. Spoilers ahead, you have been warned.
How much do you know about the Vampire Messiah and what she plans for this world?
Welcome back from hell.
Season 1 ends obviously on a downer, and as I referenced in the intro for this episode, Alucard is back, and I found it really interesting. I'm kind of just going to give my general feelings, Rain, and then we can kind of go through the episodes one by one or as a whole. It's
Yeah.
entirely up to you. It doesn't matter to me, which was a lot of this episode feels like our main cast, they go back to lick their wounds. Richter Belmont, Annette, and then obviously Alucard showing up. And what I found interesting about this season was the setup is quite different than, and there's going to be just based on what this show is. It is a spinoff of the Castlevania show, and I know we talked a lot about the original series in the season 1 review, but I found this season much more of a dichotomy to season 2 of Castlevania, particularly with we had spent the origin with Dracula in Castlevania, and then
Mhm.
season 2 was really about building those connections and then leading to his demise at the end of season 2. I did a trailer react for the last trailer of Castlevania Nocturne season 2 before the season came out, and my prediction was, and I swore in spoilers, that we were going to kill the vampire messiah at the end of this Sekhmet. That does happen, but we're going to discuss that a little bit later. I really liked getting to see sort of the origin around the mythology of Sekhmet. I thought that was cool getting to see bits and pieces.
That was really cool. Like opening each episode with that was so interesting and refreshing, and you never got the whole thing in one go. It was always just like, here's a little bit, here's a little bit more, and it was always very rewarding.
Well, and we get to see bits of that with Alucard in a less well executed show. He would have sat us down and told us where he's been for 300 years,
Yeah.
right? And we get bits and pieces like he was in Japan or he was somewhere else and this is what he has experienced. And I liked this season. I think it really does ramp up near the end. I thought it's an interesting problem that I had with this season in particular, which is I think it does a lot of excellent things and what I love from Castlevania, but more than anything, I really think for whatever reason it felt rushed with a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
the character development, which I was quite
Oh
disappointed by because this all it's if you so 5 seasons including Nocturne and the original run of Castlevania. They're really well paced and the character development feels really earned in this, and similar to the way that you watch the 7 and 8 together. I kind of did the same. I watched them in 3, so the season, if you're unaware, not you the listener, it's in another 8 episode season. I did 3, 3 and 2. So I did a similar viewing experience. And through 7 and 8, I was sitting there and Alina was next to me and I went, "Did I miss something?"
oh
And
yeah.
it's like,
Oh,
right?
it's like I did 6 and 2, not recommended, just because I was having episodic whiplash. Like one episode a character's a certain way, and then a whole episode later, all of a sudden it's like it almost feels like the show would have benefited from a week to week release. So you had time to digest the changes in character per episode. Not to say that they're poorly written characters. Everyone's like motivations really works out. All the reasoning for things is really good. You know, why a character would do a certain thing makes perfect sense. And then but it's like episode to episode hardcore. There's not like the nice thing about Castlevania, the original series was like you almost did feel like there was nice gradual payoff over a season instead of like per episode change. It was like, no, a character's that way for pretty much the whole season, and then maybe by the end of the season has made a change or a shift. But this one, whether it's because they had so many characters that you need to cover, or they're just like, we got to move this plot along, they were like, character does this, now character does this, and it's just like, okay, it's good. I like it. I like where you're going with it. Just very, very whiplashy.
Yeah, and I think that it's unfortunate that that's the case. It read to me, and I don't know if you agree with me, which is it's Netflix in general, and that is a Bermuda's Triangle on whether it's got good reception or from audiences or critics. Sometimes things just get canceled anyways, if even they're getting viewing. And where this ends, and I want to talk about the ending stuff later, but just this season as a
Mm,
whole felt as if, okay, we only have 8. We don't know if we're getting 8 more, 16 more.
mm,
They clearly have set the things in motion for what could be in season 3. And if you haven't listened to our season 1 review, I highly recommend checking that out. It is still one of my top 10 listened to episodes. But what I appreciate so much about this universe is I have played 0 seconds of any of the games,
mm.
and I adore this franchise now. And so the setup of what season 3 could be is really interesting. But in my mind, also, that kind of feels like a different, or not a different show, but a new show because of where it could be going. And particularly with the Richter and Annette relationship, where, and you made a great point, which is I like where they go, but each episode
Mhm.
feels like we've had arcs or a significant furthering of our relationship off screen, yet this is maybe a week long in terms of actual time.
Yeah, the whole speech he gives her in I guess it would be the penultimate episode, if I'm remembering correctly, when she's like unconscious and he's talking her back. I'm like, cool, that did happen like 4 days before this, man. Like things have happened really quickly. And at least again, if you harken back to the first series, the original Castlevania, like the whole Belmont thing, that was you could tell that was months and maybe even a year over the course of a year, all this stuff happening. And so you could understand there's things happening off screen, but you're like, yeah, that's right. We wouldn't have followed these characters through the whole journey. We're just catching in bits and pieces. But the show itself, the Nocturne, is like this is what every day looks for them, like another struggle, a new thing, and you're like, okay, it's a little intense here with these two people,
Yeah.
but okay.
Well, and I made a point before we jumped on here today where I was kind of skimming through season 1 again because I didn't want my impression to be, "Oh, well, you didn't tease that, or that wasn't a reference. Like, did you really do that?" And then there are moments, they're very, I would describe them as very brief and subtle between Richter and Annette, and of course, having
Yeah.
the relationship any romance, there's going to be that with the leads. And I'm glad it's not between Richter and his stepsister of Maria, because there's a
Yeah.
different part of
Oh
the internet
man.
for that. But in terms of its balance, season 1 probably has more characters, but unfortunately the balancing act with season 2, it just doesn't seem to be up to the par of the previous season, which is interesting because we have less people. You killed people off. In my opinion, we didn't need to keep going back to Edouard, the opera singer,
Yeah.
because outside of
Oof.
the one French revolutionary soldier, it
Mhm.
does that the
That
souls
payoff
being,
felt so flat.
yeah, it did. It's unfortunate because I like how Nocturne, I mean, there are obviously staples of what makes the show amazing, and I'm sure we're going to talk about our favorite action beats. But outside of him providing a soundtrack, his point of being in the story, like his function is, yes, you can still be a person inside of a night creature. That's great. Season
Yeah.
2 does nothing with it. So he's somebody who should have been killed off, but isn't,
Yeah.
which was kind of frustrating. And a
Yeah.
relationship that I actually do appreciate, and it's not going to be just crapping on the show because I actually did really enjoy it, particularly the action of the finale. And there's a lot of really great references
Mm.
in the finale fights because, I mean, it's a two-parter for lack of better description, even though they're individual episodes. But having somebody like, I want to just say Just, but I know it's Just Belmont by Ian Glenn, having a elder statesman Belmont is a whole different dynamic than what we're used to. So that in itself,
Mm.
I really appreciate because when we met Trevor, the drunk stumbling through random places, just beating people up for money, they're all dead at that point in the Castlevania runtime. But in Nocturne, we already met Richter's mom, Julia, in the scene in Boston where his mom was killed by a vampire. And then we flash forward to him later where Richter it kind of feels like he's kind of stuck in this, which is we saw his traumatic origin story and he gets his magic back. And unfortunately for his character in this season, he doesn't have a moment like that in this one. Like he does
Yeah.
some like I am a man moments where he's like
Mhm.
clearly still fighting through that, but his connection with Annette, which again, the back and forth between those characters where they are by the end, like you buy that relationship, even though it
Yeah.
feels rushed.
Mhm.
He doesn't feel like he's fighting to protect her. It just his like to you. I mean, there's a lot of Dragon Ball elements in this season,
Mm.
particular, and that's
Mhm.
not a criticism. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But his power level just doesn't seem to
Yeah.
have scaled effectively over the 2 seasons.
Just since we're on the finale fight, that was literally 2 full episodes of finale fighting, which I'm not against. I give full credit to the creators and the creative team of the show for finding just new and really creative ways to kill people on screen, like with magic and all that kind of stuff. It's cool as hell. It's cool as hell. But like you said, it's like season 1 had that amazing Richter got his magic back moment, and like it really feels like that's the peak of like really cool ideas, even though they're just laying on like here's more cool stuff we can do with this character. I'm like, I agree, you got more cool stuff, but that really sick peak was in season 1, and you guys are still looking for another sick peak somewhere.
Well, interestingly enough, because I love a character score, particularly in theatrical films, and the character beat when he gets his powers back it's a piece of music I've added to my phone, and I found it really interesting because they do play it. Let's just talk about the finale, and then I
Yeah,
think we can
yeah,
talk about everything else, which
yeah.
is just Maria shows up having come back from the dark side. I actually think Maria's story was really interesting and not given enough time
No,
because of everything
genuinely not enough.
no, she could have had 2 full episodes. Like, so in this
Hmm.
show, they're about 30 minutes. She could have had an hour just on that, and that would have been completely compelling. We'll get back to that. But the 3 of them show up. She brings out the spirit dragon. Just has
Hmm.
gotten his magic back, and they play the same piece of music. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool. Like we're crossing the streams. We're using our tri-beam magic powers. Nobody cares how these work because science is
Yeah, yeah.
irrelevant. The element of the fight where I actually lost my mind in terms of excitement was, and I don't know if you caught this, I did rewatch Trevor versus Death at the end of season 4 because he has
Mm.
that
Mhm.
weird uh plus sign dagger that he collected throughout that season, which has such a
Yeah.
distinct shape. And when they finally feel like they're gonna tackle, I mean, it's Frieza. Like, for all, like that's what it is. They're fighting Frieza, but they're fighting Sekhmet or Walmart Sekhmet,
Yeah.
and he actually creates that blade, 2 of them out of ice.
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh my god, he made that thing that killed Death! That's so cool!" Like, there's
It's so
reference
cool.
it's so like, quite literally, because 'cause they're also made of ice. But, yeah, you're right. It hit where and there's been a lot of discussion about that. Like, we all watch a lot of action movies, and David Leitch has talked about, and I know same with Chad Stahelski, the John Wick guy, which is like, action is great, and don't get me wrong, people enjoy action for action, but when action's not motivated by story, it can kinda just become numbing at a time at
Yeah.
certain times, and the Richter or episode 6 in particular, because it's definitely one I watched the most. I got my powers back, everything's amazing, and he goes Neo essentially on all the vampires in that
Yeah.
body of water. I don't feel like and this was my biggest issue, and the rewatch probably hurt this, but watching him take on Sekhmet and then taking on I mean, I'm just honestly, all the Dragon Ball references work, but with new Sekhmet, and I honestly, their names I always forget. Drolta,
Okay.
who
Yeah.
becomes Sekhmet at the end, or Cell, for
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right, quite
For, like,
literally,
essentially, yeah.
essentially, and that's not a bad thing. Like, and Dragon Ball's taken from be inspired by great things and do your own thing with them. That's not a criticism,
Mhm.
but his ability to take her down in 8, which is and I did like that ending of 7, which was they're like, "Oh, we think we won. Oh no, things just got worse."
Mhm.
But how Richter is now able to do those things when he was getting his ass kicked by Drolta at the end of season 1. Like, that's one of my biggest problems with the story is what the build of Trevor throughout the 4 of Castlevania, like, he's not even in 4 really, and then
Yeah.
2, they're really dealing with the village, but clearly it's like Alucard is carrying all the weight of season 2, right? Quite literally. And
Quite literally, yeah.
3 is when and leading to the end of 4, Trevor's I almost said Richter, but Trevor's put through his paces, right? Like, things are getting harder and harder and harder. And I'm sure this is tough because one of the coolest parts of where we are with the current line of the Belmonts, it being 300 years post Castlevania, is he is a magic wielder with all the physical capabilities of the athleticism of the
Mhm.
Belmont vampire hunters. So they're incredible, but I'm guessing he's maybe 20. That would be my guess for
I would
Richter.
have to assume
Yeah, right?
2018, somewhere in there, like
Some yeah. But I can't remember which director said this, but it was talking about it was Jon Favreau when he was talking about there's a bunch of weird comparisons to this. But one of his favorite things about watching the first Spider-Man and one of the things they wanted to do with Iron Man, which was you see the development of the abilities. And with Richter in 1, we got now he's got the magic back. And for somebody who spent 15 years without it, we see like he obviously from a point of pure emotion. And this works in because I'm Castlevania is an anime. It's made by Powerhouse Animation. Characters
yeah.
are able to do things like mothers lifting cars and whatnot. Like, they're able to do something because of what is required in that moment, and that works for Richter there. But then through 2, he's like, I got this all figured out. There's not really like, there's no mid-season fight to go to like something like Rocky where you're like, oh my God, he's down for the count. Oh no, wait a minute, I figured it out. Right? That
Yeah.
challenge,
Yeah.
that problem you've solved. And I found that like I was thoroughly entertained by this season, but I think it needed to be longer to really set all these pieces in place for the resolution to be as gratifying as the cliffhanger was of season 1.
Yeah, season 1 really did such an interesting peak by just making it seem like, "Oh, our big bad is genuinely so big bad, is genuinely so much bigger than the main character and his other side characters," and we've just like, it just set up such a lovely pit of despair, and then it really like you said, it doesn't really feel like they ever really fixed the pit because the pit was supposed to still be there, and there was no reason that like I understand with God, I don't remember the god's name, but the god's third
Sekhmet.
Sekhmet. There we go. Thank you. The
You're
god
welcome.
Sekhmet's third soul. I understand how having that allows you to possibly lay damage and that kind of stuff, but then you go right back to, you know, Sekhmet's body double, Cell. We'll call her Cell. Like you said, Cell has all of a sudden got Sekhmet's thing, and we learned from season one that basically makes them invincible. So, like, why is Richter now like, I'm just gonna lay some kick-ass punches to some good setup here. Ice sword at the end, super cool. It's super
Oh yeah,
cool, but we
it's full Cloud Strife sword. That
yeah.
was yeah.
And I can't say that there isn't some like super magical thing there, but the writers also never identified that like Alucard's sword is like this super amazing magical thing. We just always assumed it's a normal sword with like that he can control with his mind. But like outside of that, like we weren't told like, oh, this is an incredibly special holy weapon that does things. Like that's never been said out loud. So why is it in ice format super sword like a big deal? And I just, there's a lot of like plot holes. It's great. I still loved it. It's still fun as hell to watch, but a lot of plot holes.
Yeah, I think that's what's super it's a disappointing. I'm kind of glad we're done with Sekhmet because
Yeah.
the build up in season 1 was so interesting, like a quite literally cosmically powered vampire god.
Yeah.
Alucard shows up. I'm just obviously quoting the ending of season 1. Oh my god, we're saved. Alucard is here, right? And it was a warm blanket of familiarity from
Hmm.
one of the best. Obviously, he's one of the 3 leads of the original series.
Yeah.
But what a missed opportunity, particularly, and this was much more informative when I was doing my skimming, which was we don't see Sekhmet or Erzabet Bathroy until like episode 4 of the first season,
Hmm.
and then like is in the remainder. And I myself found myself confused in doing even more so, which was she becomes like super powered at the end of season 1, causes the eclipse, and then's like, all right, I gotta bench myself. I can't do it anymore. It's like, okay. And then it's just on the bench for more than half the show till they get
Yeah.
the heart. And I actually don't mind the journey of going to France,
Yeah.
but interestingly enough, it compared to a lot of other streaming shows I've watched recently, what the first season did so well, and I think what this season just it missed was you need that level of tension that's driving it to feel like time is running out.
Yeah.
But with Sekhmet or Erzabet in this instance, because
Mhm.
she's no longer like cat lady or full
Yeah.
formed
Yeah. Yeah.
Frieza. I love all the there's gonna millennials are gonna know exactly what we're talking about, and Gen Z is gonna be like Freezer, no
Yeah.
Frieza
Yeah.
is just
Not
like
to,
sitting
not
in
to
her
be
4-poster
confused.
bed.
Not to be confused with Frieza's brother, Cooler.
Cooler, who's
Cooler.
not
Yeah.
canonical in
Not
the
canonical.
manga. Just
Not canonical.
no, just the what, oh my god, what do you even call the filler movies that
Yeah.
are not yeah, I actually think
That
Cooler
that
has a
lore
better
drop.
design.
Yeah, that lore drop is for millennials only.
Yeah, and Dragon Ball, oh my Daima, which is currently
Mhm.
airing now. Yeah, and I think that's really disappointing because season 1 of Castlevania, Vladimir Tepest or Dracula is the main character. I
Yeah.
mean, it's 4 episodes, but there's a lot of story in that 4, and then the
Yeah.
cast not blows out, expands effectively in season 2, where with Esbet being like, I can't do much, uh, Drolltag, you go do everything, and her inconsistency in terms of again, power levels are just the way that I'm evaluating a lot of this. Is
Yeah.
frustrating. And I don't know about you, but I feel like Ol Rocks, who is such an interesting character in season 1, particularly with like, I'm just kind of doing my own thing. Like, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
what I do.
Yeah.
And he's just like, he feels completely extraneous in season 2. Like, he
Yeah.
shows up to help, but if he was not in season 2, I don't think anything matters. Like, yeah, he bites his boyfriend, but that's really it.
Which I got questions about the biting the boyfriend thing simply based on canon in the wider world of things. All right. I thought the whole deal is you become an independent vampire if you drink the blood of
Yes.
like, not if somebody drinks your blood. So am I to understand, like, I'm thinking about it now, am I to understand that he bit his boyfriend became a vampire, but not an independent vampire, and he was gonna let his boyfriend bite him out of necessity, and that was therefore going to turn him into an independent vampire? Like, where's the deal? How does that work? I thought we were very clear because the holy man did not want to become a vampire.
Yeah.
Didn't want to.
No. And like that is a very interesting thing to maybe explore in season 3.
Yeah.
I want to get back to the Maria I mean her last name is irrelevant, but Renard
Yeah, yeah.
because that's the name
Yeah,
of the
yeah, yeah.
character. And that emotional toll that she goes through in season 2, I think with some readjustments probably could have just been the focus because
Yeah.
with her dad, the abbot being the forge master, and I mean, you and I both grew up with Catholicism being around.
Mm.
And then what
Mhm.
an interesting person. I mean, the church is always the bad guy. Like at the end of the
The
day,
bad guy.
always the
Always
church,
the bad guy.
always the
God,
bad guy.
my
Yeah.
my wife called out the priest like season 1. She walked by and be like, "Oh, that guy's the bad guy." I was like, "It's not always the church. It'll be fine." And then like 2 episodes later, she's like, "Oh, look, he's the bad guy. I told you." And I went, "I know. That sucks."
But I really love that perspective that he has where using creatures of the damned to protect the sovereignty and the holiness
Mm.
of those in within the church. I think that's such an interesting dilemma. And then of course, leading into season 2 where his I mean, the mother of Maria is become a vampire,
Mhm.
an independent one that we don't like. Is it through the power of love? Like, did Huey Lewis show up? Because that's not explained. At least, oh, if it is, we both clearly missed it because, and I was paying
Yeah.
attention.
Yeah, I admit I wasn't paying the closest attention, but my assumption was if you turn someone into a vampire with your blood, don't you have some level of control over them?
I don't
I
know.
mean, I think the basic rule is if they feed on your blood, they have independent thought. If you feed on them and you keep them alive after feeding on them, they serve under you, and that is based off of Helsing rules. Do not quote me. And
Sure.
there's some information about being a virgin too that I don't quite understand. So
I
get
don't
in the
know.
comments. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. Please let me know if we missed it. But with Maria dealing with one, her mother becoming a vampire, which is already a level of trauma because Maria's what is her mom's name? Tara. Tara's sister
Mhm.
was a vampire previously from Esbet. So we've got all trauma. It's a hat on. It's a trauma hat on top of another trauma hat, and the the pure anger she's filled with because the consequences of what her father's done as the Forge Master serving Esbet and or Sekhmet. No, it's Erzabet Sekhmet. Okay. Anyways, the vampire messiah, she ultimately quite literally falls to the dark side, just a bunch of other
Mhm.
intellectual property
Mhm.
metaphors, killing
Yep.
him, that affecting her magic. And if you had done like 3 episodes of her and just dealing with the consequences of how you use your magic and like how that is affected by your emotional state, the intention of what you're using these divine forces for, I think that would have been hella interesting, but
You
it's
could have done
treated
an
like a B story.
Yeah, you could have done an entire half season of her struggling with wanting that power, and then even had a couple episodes where she realizes, oh, maybe the power is not so good for me. There was tons of room there to do more, and it really felt like that's one of those storylines. I'm like, that feels really rushed. There was great core story, great core plan, and then I'd want to say at least 4 side B stories that were rushed for the whole season. Not that they were bad B stories, they were great B stories. If this was a video game, as a 40-hour video game, and those were all the side plots, great side plots, would have been awesome. But in a 20 to 30-minute episode show that only has 8 episodes, it's like breakneck, breakneck for decisions and character.
Well, in certain things, I felt like like if I was making a list of like I mean, if it was a pie chart, no, not a pie,
Mhm.
a Venn diagram. That's
Yes,
looking for
Venn
another
diagram.
visual.
Yep.
It's like great ideas,
Mhm.
that were rushed. There's a lot in the center of there. Like there
Oh,
every
yeah.
time they introduce these cool concepts. Another one that felt like, oh man, this is a big deal. When they revived Drolta, who was
Yeah.
a slain vampire, look what we did. I legitimately went, oh my god, everything has changed.
Yeah, I was like, "Great, now go get the other dead vampires and shove them in the machine, because clearly she's sick." And they didn't
Yeah.
do that.
No, nothing comes of it. Like that to me, as we discussed earlier, that's the oh no, here's the next challenge, right?
Yeah.
Send out your legions of maxed out, re-dead, undead vampires. Like
Yeah.
that's they're on the hunt as maybe like quite literally the journey to find Sekhmet's heart. It's like it's
Mhm.
not where we intend. Like make that they're on our tail when we've got to find this thing. Then you can have the loss. And another thing that I found really interesting, because it's unfortunate that it kind of feels like it goes nowhere as well, which is they build up this rivalry between Drolta and Alucard. She ultimately wins,
Yeah.
right? Because she stabs him, and I didn't want it to happen, and I'm glad it didn't because of where season 3 might go, but I had this sense this whole season that Alucard was gonna die.
There should have been at least one character death, is all I'm saying. I don't know if it's, Richter's, like, step-sibling or cousin or whatever, or I really, honestly, after they all got hit by that firewall, I was like, "Oh, old Belmont's dead.
Yeah.
He's not moving, and he's not breathing." I'm like, "Wow, what a heartfelt thing to have him protect the girl he promised to protect, and he dies." And that, like, spurs Richter on to this little girl to, like, go and kick some ass, and then he's just alive.
That's a great point where we see them, like, clearly injured, and that would Rain, you've cracked it. That's the emotional breaking point that makes him
Yes.
go father son Kamehameha 2
Yeah.
and kill Cell. Quite
Yeah.
literally,
That
that
that would have
should
been
have
great.
been
Yeah, he would have been protecting his girl. He looks over at his, like, family member, and then his grandfather, who he never really knew but kind of respected in a way, and sees he's not moving and he's not breathing, and he's like, "Now I've gone Super Saiyan 2 and ready to go." Perfect. That would have been fine.
and you can, because of the world this is, you could literally just have his ghost and Julia show up
Oh,
behind him.
that would have been
It
cool. That would have
It
been
would have been
so
unreal, right? Because the
cool.
way they use his magic, where he's like making the ice, and
Yeah.
like from a scientifically standpoint, it makes absolutely no sense, but it doesn't
Yeah, yeah.
matter. But to have him have the like he loses it,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh, Richter's got this now.
Yeah.
And it's such a small, minute thing. And I think it's probably decent enough time to talk about where season 3 might go. From what I've
Mhm.
read, because I've never played any of these games,
Yeah.
Symphony of the Night, which allegedly this is based on, but from my reading, none of that's in this whatsoever, which is Alucard is actually the focus of that game. So it's technically, I think it's the fourth. Again, if I'm quoting a game thing and I'm wrong, just assume I am wrong. But
Yeah.
it's an Alucard led game.
Mhm.
And quite frankly, I think that would be really helpful for this point in the show because of its canonical runtime feeling very brisk with maybe 2 weeks. And I feel like we're being generous with that standpoint. Having some time where Richter and Annette go back to the Caribbean to free the slaves of that area, and dealing with the consequences of what vampirism was doing over there. Having Alucard actually be the focus, would be really interested to seeing what happens with that because like the little tagline for the game here, and I'm only looking at the wiki, so apologies, which is, and this would, I would really like this because it connects kind of all of the lore together, which is
Mhm.
Alucard essentially is exploring the remains of Dracula's castle, which has reappeared after Richter Belmont's vanished. Well, in this, it's not. Maybe he does vanish because he quite literally goes on a boat across the Atlantic. But connecting into that part of the world where obviously we're in the Mediterranean aspect of Europe for this, being in France, but seeing the world we know before 300 years later. That's something that I would be interested in.
I agree. It'd be really interesting if, like, they're in North America, Richter goes missing, and they get a message from Annette saying Dracula's castle appeared, and the next day Richter disappeared.
Yeah.
And, and Alucard shows up to be like, what do you mean Dracula's castle's back? That, like, disappeared, X amount of time, or something along those lines. That would be really cool. I think they really want us to be invested in that shadowy figure, like the devil or the shadow man or whatever he calls. And I'm genuinely not. Like, it doesn't really seem that interesting. I am very interested in I think it's not Nicolette. The mom that turned into the vampire,
Oh,
the one that
Tara.
we're like Tara. Yeah,
Yeah.
Tara's story is very interesting. A fresh vampire that's just like, am I good? Am I evil? Am I gonna give in to temptation? I think that's great. That's very cool. I think the
Oh,
opera
that
singer.
but
Yeah.
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's also something that I feel like we have to talk about, or they have to, the show has to, and we're obviously going to right now, which is when Alucard is fighting Drolta cell version,
hmm
he goes like primal,
Ooh, yeah, primal.
right? Like
hmm
from an internal control standpoint, like from a psychological perspective, what does that do to him? Like, we've never seen him do that before. Does that flick a switch that he is now going to struggle with?
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah.
There's stuff to talk about with, or like, there's a story to look at there, because otherwise, why have, like, quite literally, we see there's a biological change,
hmm
right? When he goes ferocious in a way we hadn't seen from him before. So that would be curious. I don't want to hear, I not here. I don't care about the opera singer. Like,
I
what
don't care about the opera
don't
singer.
care.
I find it funny. He was just like, "Oh, will they accept me over there?" Sorry, man, they definitely won't accept you in the Caribbean. I don't know if you've been to the Caribbean, but, like, they get spooked out by a lot of things well before the British showed up and enslaved everybody. But, like, you can go. You can go.
Yeah.
You can be you know what? In all fairness to the opera singer, I didn't even realize he was singing opera half the time until I was like, "Oh yeah, we have an opera singer in this show." It's like very thematic and interesting. How quaint.
Well, it totally fits. Like, a lot of the choices make a lot of sense setting wise in terms of like what's the aesthetic going to be. Like, you quite literally have somebody with the Three Musketeers logo
Yeah.
on with our, I honestly don't even know his name. The Oh, Mizrak. Yeah,
Mm,
Mizrak, who's the knight. But
yeah.
another disappointing thing that I feel like, regardless of if they explore it again, which is, you have the ending with Olrox and Richter being like, I will kill you someday. But it's like,
Yeah.
where's that story go?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, unless he does something in the future. I mean, he killed his mom, but it's the weirdest. This is such a stupid comparison, and I don't even know if you're gonna acknowledge it, but this feels like where Jason Statham was at the end of Fast and Furious 8, which I don't know, or Fate of the Furious. Have you seen Fate of the Furious?
Man, you have picked like the one franchise I've watched
Okay,
one of
all right,
and
that's fine.
barely kept tabs.
All right, so I'll give you a rundown just so you understand, but it's absolutely ridiculous. So you're aware Furious 7 is the one where Paul Walker died when they were filming it?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so in that, all right, you've seen Tokyo Drift, I believe, right?
Yes, I have.
So in that one, Han died, right? Like, he got into the
Yes.
car crash and he died.
Yep.
Okay. At the end of Furious 6, it was revealed that Jason Statham was responsible for that car crash,
Okay.
killing Han. Okay.
Sure.
Big deal. And that was the momentum of 7, where they're like, oh my God, this guy is systematically trying to kill a family.
My
And then
family.
a family. And then in Furious 8, or Fate of the Furious, they should have the fact that it wasn't F8 of the Furious, I'm still mad to this day. And then in that movie, he helped get Vin Diesel's out of wedlock baby off a plane, and they had this
Yes.
scene where they're like, "You're okay." Like, you've maybe seen this clip on YouTube because it's
I've
horrible. Yeah.
I've seen the clip. It's a bad clip.
Yeah. Wait a minute. He killed Han.
Yeah.
No, he saved your baby, but no.
Yeah.
And then,
Committed
I mean,
murder
it turned
against your
out, yeah,
family.
Yeah, and then it turned out in Fast 10, Han was never dead, but that doesn't matter. Where Olrox showed up and he went zap zap. I'm like, well, he didn't actually kill her. He just was like, look at me, zap zap.
Yeah, in
And
fact,
then
he
he,
did a bad job killing her. He left her on the roof, and that's another thing too. Too much of this, like, I did a good enough job. I'm just gonna walk away from the situation. It's like, no, 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 finish the job, guys. Like, don't just.
yeah,
Same thing with
I'm,
Richter. Like, really early on in the show, it's like, yeah, man, you've got the vampire. Now finish the fucking job. You're a professional. God, everybody's supposed to be a professional here.
yeah, look at how good I did. I'm just going to slowly turn around.
Unbelievable. Just a whole season of that. You know what didn't happen in the first season? No one just turned around and was like, "No, this guy's got to die. If he either has to get away very reasonably because he puts me in a bad situation, or he dies. One or the
Yeah.
other."
Yeah, it's true. I like this show. It is entertaining enough. My criticism is just in terms of the finesse to which the first season was handled, as well as the previous show. Unfortunately, when you make arguably one of the best video game adaptations ever, the bar's really high. And
Are so high.
what I'm probably fingers crossed this does get renewed, because regardless of our criticism, Rain and I clearly both did enjoy this and want to see more of it, which is a testament again. Like I haven't even like Rain, have you played any of the games?
No. Oh no,
Yeah.
I played original Castlevania
Yeah.
like years and years ago on the NES or SNES or whichever one it was out on. And it's like it's a cool game, but my understanding is like Symphony of the Night is one of the best Castlevania games or Metroidvania games of all time, and I'm aware of it, but I just don't have the kind of time to play those games.
I also know I probably wouldn't have the patience of having to go back and forth, back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
fingers crossed this gets renewed. And if they manage to finesse, I think, some of our problems with season 2, I think season 3
yeah,
easily could be better. I'm going to say one thing that I actually don't think I should have done, which was rewatch season 1,
yeah,
because I was more aware of what my problems were with season 2 beforehand.
mm-hmm.
So I like Richter, I'm really glad that the characters we have in this show are not just carbon copies of the characters. Like, we don't really have a Sypha. I
Yeah,
like that our female leads in these shows are completely independent characters, not reliant on man. Like, their connection between Annette and Richter was compelling. It was a cool story, rushed though at the same time, that's okay. Sometimes you just don't have enough time. And if this is the end, it's a decent enough conclusion. I think a lot of pieces are where they should be. And it's wildly entertaining. And it's a really cool American anime. Like, we don't get a lot of
yeah.
these. And just for action alone, it's going to be entertaining. So that will do it for our review of season 2 of Castlevania. The whole season is available on Netflix, as well as season 1. Let's jump into question of the week.
Can I ask you a question?
Just one?
There's something I've been meaning to ask you.
I ask the questions, you answer the questions.
Why do you ask questions to which you already know the answers?
Did that count as a question?
Yes.
Damn it.
Last week's question of the week was probably controversial for some, but I'm going to argue it wasn't really. What is your favorite live-action Disney Plus Star Wars show? Rain, I know you've been up and down with Disney Plus. So, and this
Yeah.
wasn't based on quality, but I'm curious, what is your favorite live-action Disney Plus Star Wars show?
Well, it'll have to be the only one I've seen, which is The Mandalorian.
You haven't seen Andor?
Nope.
Interesting.
It's on the list. It's on the
That's
list.
fair. Okay.
Just didn't get to it.
Now let's see what the listeners had to say. Dylan Pollock says, my favorite was The Mandalorian, but none of the Star shoes have really grabbed me. I'm assuming, Dylan, you mean Star Wars shows, but we'll call them Star shoes moving forward. Vandad Cheheri on TikTok said The Mandalorian. David34 says Obi-Wan. Shane Southpaw says Andor 100%, no questions asked. And we have a little email here from Keen Machine. Greetings, Kyle. I've never watched Star Wars. Hard to believe, I know, but to substitute an answer to your question of the week, here's mine to you. If you found yourself as part of the first moon colony expedition and could only bring one DVD with you, what film or partial series are you bringing to last you the rest of your moon-dwelling life? Netflix has blocked your IP address from streaming on the moon. Obviously. Keep it keen. I think this is a really great question because it comes to mind based on what you're asking, Keen, that I can only bring one film or a collection of films, so that's kind of how I'm going to approach this. And if it's a series, I'm assuming I can only bring part of it. So here I have a twofold answer. I've got a lot of amazing Blu-ray collections, and I'm going to go Blu-ray, of course, because it's the most expansive of my whole collection. Oh, this is a good one. I'm actually looking around my office to see if I have something that would spur my idea. This is tricky because obviously you've said it has to be part of a series. I'm trying to think, you know what it might, I don't know, this is really difficult based on, let's see, because it says part or a partial series. So Keen, I'm assume you mean I can't bring a complete collection because even in Blu-rays, that would be a multiple cases. So if it's a single case collection, what am I bringing? Oh, you know, as I feel like this is generic. I'm going so I'm going to kind of say things out loud as I'm thinking about them. I'm looking to specifically to my left. I have a lot of my TV Blu-rays. Friends, the first case covers the first 4 seasons. So that would be a lot of TV. And I know Friends is probably like a generic answer, but I'm also trying to think of something that would be substantial in terms of length. Also, what's something I haven't seen overly a ton that I would want to watch over and over again? Ooh, you know what? I'm thinking probably more cartoon related. It would probably be Cowboy Bebop, honestly, because the Blu-ray that I have for that is the whole anime. It's all 26 episodes. And even though I've seen through the series maybe twice, I know there's so much intricate detail in that show. And it's such a interesting variety of storytelling that that's probably what it would be. Now, this is just off the cuff. Maybe if I sat with this for a week, I would come up with a different answer. But as of right now, kind of just looking around, it would be Cowboy Bebop. I'm curious, Keen, what would it be for you? Thank you so much to everybody who answered this week's question of the week or sent in their own question. If you haven't seen the franchise I'm talking about and you just want to get my opinion on something, Jermaine recently asked me if I would play a Green Arrow video game if it was set in the DC universe. And I said, yes, as long as it was good and the story was good. I'm not adverse to playing video games in the DC universe. You know this, Jermaine. I just won't play bad ones like Gotham Knights and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. This week's question of the week, I'm curious because this is a vast array of intellectual property and it's currently not, it's domain free, which is, what is your favorite movie or TV show with vampires in it? It might be a series that ran for a long time, or it could be a series of books that were adapted into films. There's not going to be any criticism. One of the best parts of these supernatural characters and this archetype this archetype with Dracula is he's been around for over 100 years. So the variety to which you can enjoy the character is going to vary from person to person. So I'm looking forward to hearing your answers. You can answer directly on Spotify or YouTube. You can always email the podcast, filmrealistpod@gmail.com, or you can tag the Film Realist on all the social medias and make sure to include the hashtag QOTW with your answer. Next week's episode is going to be an interesting one. I'm going to see Dogman, which is a movie, and I am also going to react to the first 2 episodes of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, the upcoming Spider-Man cartoon that is MCU adjacent. So that'll be coming out next week. If you haven't already and you enjoy the show, please leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. There is a goal I'm trying to reach that would allow the Film Realist to move on to the next step in what I can cover, in the access that I would have, which would be absolutely incredible. Rain, thank you for coming back to the podcast.
Thank you for having me for the rare amount of time I have.
It's limited and it's special, so I'm going to enjoy it. My name is Kyle Naranya, and I will see you next time.